And I have tried to bypass the lobby, but for some reason Teams is not playing. And it's still beeping through. So there's a little bit of pinging going on, and I apologise for that. So today we've got the wonderful Michelle Maden from Liverpool. Michelle is a lecturer in evidence synthesis, and her path nearly crossed a few years ago in that Michelle worked at Edghill, but she had gone off just to Liverpool as I started at Edghill, so we just slightly didn't work together. But I have been to some of Michelle's sessions previously, so I know that we're in for a treat. So she's a lecturer in evidence synthesis in the Liverpool Reviews and Implementation Group at University of Liverpool, and is an associate tutor in evidence synthesis at Edghill University. Michelle's a qualified information specialist. She has over 20 years of supporting postgrad students who are undertaking systematic reviews. She's in a unique position to provide an analysis of the common search errors found in student dissertations, which is what Michelle's going to speak about today. So I am going to, in fact, before I do that, if everyone can make sure the mic is on mute, that would be great. And usually, if you've been to these these conversations before, you know that the format is to put your question in the chat, like them, and then we'll ask the questions. However, because there's so many of us today, I'm going to ask you to use the chat by all means, but leave your questions until the end. So if you want to chat amongst yourselves, that's fine. But any questions for Michelle would be great at the end. We've got time at the end. So over to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Louise, and thank you very much for inviting me to talk today to everybody. Apologies about my lighting. I work I work in a room that is very bright, and I've always struggled to get the lighting just right, but sometimes that's just as well. Okay, so welcome. Yeah, so I am going to talk today about some of the common errors found in student systematic review dissertations, and I suppose I want to highlight, having, I suppose, supervised and marked well over sort of 200 student review dissertations, I've often found myself leaving the same sort of comments on students' draft work as well. The same things often crop up from time to time as well. And, searching to inform a systematic review is a daunting task and can be a difficult task for the student reviewer as well. So this presentation is going to highlight some of the common searching errors found in these student dissertations. So there'll be probably the obvious ones that you might expect, such as in the conduct of the search, the incorrect use of Boolean, and so on. But hopefully the presentation will also highlight some of the omissions and errors that perhaps you may not necessarily have contemplated before as well. So, for example, you may not get to see the end product that the students produce, the finished systematic review itself. So this presentation will provide some insight into the common searching errors that cover not only the conduct of the review itself, but also the context for the review and the reporting of the review as well. And the idea is then that the presentation will enable academic librarians like yourself to better anticipate student requests for help, but identify areas, where you can offer your own types of support, in terms of development of resources, or even, highlighting issues to tutors as well. Because sometimes they are part of the problem, not the solution. But I suppose I should add a disclaimer to this presentation really as well, is that, the examples, the errors, the omissions I'm going to talk about really are based on quite large set of master level systematic review dissertations, and they are mostly they are all from the medical and health faculty as well. So they kind of are really focused around an analysis of that, and most of them are 12,000 word dissertations that the students chose to undertake a systematic review on. Pretty much, I'd say 99% of them were systematic reviews as opposed to other types of evidence synthesis. In fact, probably 99.9% of the dissertations are actually systematic reviews. I've only ever had one qualitative evidence synthesis, but I think that probably reflects the nature of my students from the medical background really more than anything else. Okay, so I suppose, obviously this session focuses on the search to inform a systematic review, but one of the first things to confirm with the student, I think, when they first, if they appear to you for help, etc., is really to clarify, are they actually doing a systematic review? Or is it that they have been told to adopt a systematic approach to a literature review? And I think there is a little bit of confusion here, from tutors around the nature of the systematic review. And the two requests are not the same, as you well know. And the last thing you want to do is to send the student down the wrong road by giving them the wrong advice. So I'd always, clarify with the student, first of all, that they are indeed looking to do a systematic review. Now, it's important to know also what the student is going to be expected to produce as well. So not only, is it a systematic review or is it a literature review done systematically, but also what the student may or may not be expected to include in their systematic review with regards to the search. I suppose really for most postgraduate dissertations, this tends to be a full-blown systematic review, but for shorter module assignments that I've been involved with as well, both at postgraduate and undergraduate level, I've actually found differences in what the students are expected to produce that has often been labelled as a systematic review, but actually in reality it isn't quite a systematic review. For example, one of the recent psychology modules I taught on asked the students to follow the principles of a systematic review, but told them not to do any quality assessment, and they were restricted to only including 10 papers. So I think, you just need to be a bit aware about, the background for the requests or help from students as well. And don't necessarily automatically assume each time that when students say they're doing a systematic review, that they're doing a full-blown proper systematic review. But in addition, also, students often have guidance on, what they have to produce. There may be instructions on where they have to place certain things. So, for instance, I've had assignment guidelines that told them to put the search in a table in the main text as opposed to an appendix as well. So, without knowing what is expected of the student, it's often difficult to provide, the correct assistance and help for them as well. So I'd always kind of check with the student, what's the guidance? Can you show me the guidelines? Look at the learning outcomes, because there may be certain things that they need to meet for the broader dissertations at, postgraduate thesis level. These criteria are often broad, but they relate to the systematic review. For the shorter modules, they're often very specific to the systematic review and might actually highlight certain methods that need to be explored in certain ways as well. So it's really useful to know the context for the systematic review that the student is expected to produce. And without assuming that everybody here is an expert in searching to inform systematic reviews, but I suspect many of you are, just a quick overview really of the role of the search in the systematic review process. So when to search and how we would search. Well, we would expect really slightly different searches to be undertaken at 3 different points in the review process. Firstly, the exploratory search at the start of the review to scope the literature to inform a protocol, identify any previously published reviews on the same topic. More on that shortly. Then once the review protocol is signed off, the main searches for the review undertaken to identify the studies to actually include in the review itself, before the final supplementary searches, which use the included studies as key papers for citation searching, etc., is usually the last search to be undertaken to inform the review as well. With obviously potentially searches requiring updating before the review is completed, though in my experience this only really happens if the student wants to publish their work. But throughout the whole process, there is a need for transparency of the search in order to ensure the assessments of accuracy and to allow for reproducibility of the search process as well. So let's take a look then at some of the common errors. And I think I've highlighted sort of 10 errors. 10's a nice number. So let's go with that then. So error number 1 then, in terms of what students fail to do or omit to do with their searches and systematic reviews. And this is right at the start, and it's a failure to actually scope their topic. Now, the process where I am a tutor is that a student has to register a topic in order to do a systematic review, and this can be done a few months before the student is actually assigned a tutor. But I can't tell you how often a student will register a topic but has failed to actually check to make sure whether there is a systematic review that's already been conducted on their topic before they start. And one of the, the key issues is that they're not really supposed to do a systematic review. Obviously, if it's already been done, because it would be fairly easy to reproduce with some tweaking of the text the work that's already been conducted. The searches will have been presented, and hopefully all the appraisals will have already been done as well, and relevant data extracted, etc., and conclusions drawn. So it can cause multiple headaches as it opens up, the potential for students to plagiarize the work. But it's also, a failure on the student, a failure on the part of the student to scope can actually impact on the volume of the studies that they are then left with to include. I mean, I had one student who started their review without really engaging with me and said they had found about, 125 studies to include in their systematic review. And you just kind of go, right, okay, 125, let's take a step back here and see, what's going on as well. So, for a dissertation, it's a ridiculously large number of studies, and had they approached earlier, we could have looked at the search, we could have looked at their inclusion and exclusion criteria, and we could have refined the review question and the criteria in order to reduce down those number of studies very quickly and very easily as well. So scoping is very quick and easy to do and can save the student a lot of time and effort, not only at the start of the review, but actually throughout the whole review process as well. So how can you help them then with the scoping? Remind them, perhaps, and their tutors, potentially, to run a quick and dirty search on their topic. And I tend to, when students are first assigned to me, I'll take their topic and do a very quick and dirty title search, just in PubMed, and just restrict to systematic reviews and see, can I see anything that's there already that, is a potential, duplication of what the student is requiring to do. They're supposed to actually check themselves, but my experience of that is that they never do. So I always do it for them just to make sure. I also look at Prospero as well, in order to make sure we check also for reviews that are currently underway. But what happens then if they find a systematic review on their topic? I think, telling them that it's not the end of the world it is important, and there are a number of things that they can do. We can look at the reviews that we've found that are potentially the same. We can check the date the search was last undertaken. We can check to see if any new studies have been published since, and then they can update the review. We can also tweak the review inclusion or, question as well, but they must seek approval from their tutor over any changes to their topic. In our institution, any changes to a topic, often in particular with regards to the question, not the inclusion criteria, but certainly with regards to the review question or the topic, often requires some level of re-registration of the review as well. So bear that in mind as well. I think error number two, there's lots of assumptions about searches and systematic reviews, the myths around search conduct as well. It's amazing how much students believe to be true about the searching process as well. So I've had students that say, yes, no, we must have two people independently conduct the searches in order to do the systematic review as well. Well, that's not true. Okay, it's giving an added level of, independent verification, but at the same time, it's additional work and it's not necessarily a requirement. Some believe that the more databases they search, the better. I counted probably around 25 databases from one student, including several that retrieved 0 records, because actually the records they were indexed in that source weren't actually even in the scope of the review. And two fairly common ones that I'm sure a lot of people have experience with is, that they search both PubMed and Medline as well. And I think the other most common one I found is that when they're translating their searches, they take that to mean they just copy and paste what they've already done into other multiple sources as well. So they'll take even the mesh terms from Medline and they'll throw them into Embase and CINAHL as well. And they don't really understand the process of translating. As for, I suppose, error number 3, I think you can probably guess what the errors may be in relation to the search conduct as well. You know, they are fairly obvious ones really in terms of developing the search. The student may choose the wrong databases because they're not familiar. They may not include subject headings because they don't understand how these can benefit the search within the systematic review. There are, you know, multiple errors and issues with this, with the spellings that we've come across as well. Incorrect use and combination of ands and ors to combine terms and concepts as well. Lack of any demonstration of advanced searching techniques, truncation and proximity. And I suppose for those who are really struggling and don't necessarily understand the process as well, we see layering of searches as well. So lots of single line searches that combine 2 or more concepts within their review, all kind of laid out in about 100 lines worth of searches as well. So they haven't been grouping their concepts together. They've just been taking on words from different concepts and then trying ands and ors in different combinations as well. And one of the other ones, which is probably what I also see in reviews when I peer review the searches and etc. for publication, is the I suppose in the transcription of the searches, the transcribing of the searches from say Medline to Cochrane, that how these databases work differently with proximity operators and truncation as well. So, you know, a number of errors there that crop up, and, you know, that is not unexpected, is it really, that we're going to see these types of errors coming through. But I think, you know, that what else do they omit, more importantly, from their searches as well? Most frequently, they fail to search beyond the databases. Now, this again may be because of the criteria for the assignment is restricting them in relation to, you know, where they search, in relation to how many studies they should be including in their review. So it is important to kind of consider that as well. But if they don't, and they are, you know, missing those sources beyond the databases, you know, they, regardless of whether that is in the assignment requirements or not, then they should be recognizing those limitations within their discussion of their systematic review later on. Yeah, I suppose also really some of the other omissions in when they're conducting their searches across different sources is that, yes, they will have a really nicely well-defined, well-written Medline search strategy, but when they start to move it into the different sources as well, there will be errors that creep in. We've already talked about just copying and pasting the search strategy as a whole, but sometimes things get missed, terms are missed out as well. Not necessarily, this is not necessarily a bad thing all the time. It depends upon the source that they're searching and, you know, how broad, you know, the criteria is within those databases. But we would usually teach the students that if they're doing the main databases like Med9, Embase and CINAHL, that they kind of stick with the same free text terms, even though the subject terms will differ across those sources. But when they move into the broader, you know, search resources, Web of Science, Scopus, it might be that we have to kind of amend the terms a little bit so we're not overwhelmed with evidence. We might have to change the fields in which we're searching as well. So it's not always a bad thing that things are missing, but we need to understand, you know, why they've done it. Is it an error, or actually are they, you know, making adjustments because of the volume of the evidence as well? Students are sometimes not necessarily that familiar with the limits, and yes, okay, they understand English language limits, they understand date limits, they apply them incorrectly sometimes, but that's you know, something to highlight in relation to if you are applying the database date limits as well. Is there a justification for those date cutoffs to be applied? And then for some topics, they could often reduce their searches down even further by removing animal studies as well. So, you know, they miss things out, and that's largely because they're not familiar with the searching process. But obviously, you guys as information professionals, librarians, are much more on top of these things as well. Okay, excuse me. So how can you help with, you know, issues around omissions, issues around the conduct of the searches as well? You know, it depends. It depends what your capabilities are, what your, I suppose, your time is. You know, what do you have available at your disposal? Are you able to kind of offer some training? If not, there are plenty of, you know, links out there to free training sources on, you know, how to search the databases, because for searching, often, you know, reading how to do a search from a book or a guidance document doesn't help the student that much with the practicalities of actually conducting the search. And what they're struggling with is actually, how do they do it in the database? You know, they understand the concepts of breaking the search down into, you know, PCO elements and ands and ors, but actually it's once they get to the database, they don't know where to start, and they don't know where to look and how to locate, you know, subject headings, etc. As well. So it's more about the, you know, how do you actually, once you get into the database, how do you do it kind of thing as well. So, you know, what we offer where I am at Liverpool is we offer live webinars of searching different resources. We record them so the students can access, you know, this is how you search Cochrane, for example. This is how you search Medline, Ovid, etc. And I think it's just understanding how the different platforms and the different databases work is all that some students actually need to help them progress their review as well. You know, and I suppose also, you know, we can highlight also the fact that, you know, these skills are transferable, but at the same time, bear in mind that when you come to transfer those skills, unless you know how to transfer them in terms of how the database works, it can be a little bit tricky for them as well. And if you don't have specific training, then offer some signposting to resources. There are loads of good resources on the web, free YouTube tutorials on searching different sources. But, you know, ideally, you could create your own mini tutorials, you know, for the common search sources as well. But, you know, why not make use of what's already there? And on my slides at the end, I've added some resources and some useful training videos that I've come across, some very recently, that I think are useful for the students as well. Quick wins in the search as well, in terms of pushing them beyond the databases, is really useful. You know, take a key journal, have a look in the last 6 months, scan the total table of contents, check the references of your included studies for additional studies, ask your tutors, ask your clinical peers. These things are incredibly quick to do, and, you know, and they demonstrate a really good example of going on beyond the database searches as well. In fact, you know, they are much easier, aren't they, to conduct than trying to get to grips with 3 or 4 different search platforms as well. So they're what I call the quick wins. You know, encourage them to do that as well. You know, if you have the time, you could offer to peer review their protocol, their sources that they've selected, their search strategies. I tend to do this only for our PhD students or those that are going to publish their review. And in return, I always ask for co-authorship. And it's not rude, I think, to ask. And you've got to be really kind of, you know, upfront about this as well, because the search is part of the methodology after all. And very few tutors, you know, have their names on a paper, and they've actually done all of the methods in the review itself as well. So why shouldn't you have your name on there, be recognised for your input as well into the method section? And the students are usually most willing. They're usually very grateful. So they'll say yes to anything at those stages as well. But I think it is important. I think it is really important as well. We need to be recognised for our contribution. Okay. So error number 5 then, what's this about? So using, I suppose, it's something that you see not only in student dissertations, but actually if you're reading sort of published literature as well, is that there'll often be a sentence, or not often, but there'll sometimes be a sentence that say, we searched the literature in accordance with the PRISMA guidance. Now, you know, this lack of understanding about, you know, what PRISMA is and how you're supposed to use it is fairly common, I think. So, you know, searches are not conducted in accordance with PRISMA. They are reported in accordance with the PRISMA guidance as well. You know, searches should be conducted in accordance with the methodological guidance on how to conduct a search for a systematic review. So you'd be looking for kind of, you know, links to Cochrane handbooks for the CRD guidance on systematic reviews. And I'm going to promote our book as well, the Student's Guide to Doing a Systematic Review. More on that at the end as well. So, you know, I think it's just a bit of a misunderstanding. And this happens not only for searching, I have to say, this misunderstanding around guidance for systematic review methodology, but it happens for quality assessment as well. So, you know, I've seen students suggest that they want to use the consort statement to appraise their studies for including in a systematic review. Now, the consort is for RCTs, obviously, but it's for the reporting of the RCT, not helping the student to assess methodological quality, bias, that kind of things as well. So these things happen, you know, beyond the search as well. So it's just about raising awareness really as well. You know, when they come to you to say, you know, oh, what guidance are you using to help you to inform the conduct of your review methods, etc., and advise them on the difference if they come back with PRISMA. Okay. Error number 6 then. Now this again is a fairly common error that we see in the student systematic reviews, particularly in the methods section. And, you know, at postgraduate level in particular, it's really, really important to demonstrate a justification for the methods. So, you know, the justification for the searching methods. So not just a description of what you did, where you searched, but actually an understanding, a critique of the way in which it was done. You know, it should, you know, be underpinned with references to the methodological literature as well. So frequent omissions tend to be things like, you know, demonstrating a need to conduct a sensitive search in a systematic review. Its importance in helping to minimise publication bias. You know, failing to include a clinical justification for the search cutoff date, etc. You know, why is this important? Well, it demonstrates a deeper understanding of the review methodology with reference to that method's literature. And it's often, you know, the people that do this, the students that do this are often rewarded with a higher grade because they you know, it's all about the justification for the approach, particularly within the PhD context as well. And it's also, you know, one of the learning outcomes of the assessment may be that the student has to demonstrate this. So if they don't, then they fail. So, you know, again, it could be linked back to what they need to or have to produce. But you know, and this is one of the areas in which I think student systematic reviews differ from those published systematic reviews as well, because you know, and I do encourage students to go and read systematic reviews, to be familiar with them. I don't know how many of them do, judging by some of the reviews that come through our system. But, you know, it's something that is, it will give them a background to the structure of the review, but they lack, the ones that are published in the literature, they do lack the justification for the methodology as well. So perhaps we're being a bit harsh on the students when we're saying, you know, be careful, you know, don't just be descriptive. It's because what they're reading is descriptive, and that's purely to do with the, you know, the nature of the journals, the nature of the what they're reading in the published literature, which is what you'd expect, you know, no justification as well. Okay. So how can you help really? Well, we offer, you know, some advice around, you know, obviously this is what you need to describe in terms of your methods, because yes, that still is important. You do have to say what you did, but we also offer advice around, well, how do we critique that method as well? And we tend to hand out a document that, you know, will appear on a few slides as we go through this, that highlights the structure of the systematic review, but actually, you know, informs or guides students on the types of things to report within those sections as well. So around the methods, not only, well, what do you search, but, you know, explain why you're doing it in this way. You know, think about, you know, why you selected the resources that you did. You know, if you applied limits, why did you do that? Always ask the why questions when you're writing your methods as well. You know, keep that in the back of your head. You know, when you're writing out your description, supplement it with why you're doing it in that way as well. There we go. So, you know, lots of things around the conduct of the searching as well. But what about errors students make when they're reporting the searches? Now, again, several errors will occur at this stage that will come as no surprise to you as well. You know, the lack of details on, you know, including a search date, lack of information on what platforms the databases were searched on, for example. But a common error is, you know, only for students to include the keywords of their search, not the full search strategy, for example. But then this might be something that, you know, people who publish in journals are also guilty of as well. So we can't be too harsh on the students for this. It's what they're reading, you know, and you know, good practice breeds good practice, doesn't it? And so on. So, you know, we do need to kind of remind students, you know, to kind of include their search strategies for purposes of reproducibility and transparency, and also assessment of accuracy, because as a marker, as somebody who marks systematic reviews, if I don't see a search strategy, then how do I know that they've conducted their search accurately? They've found the most appropriate evidence as well. So, you know, one of the recommendations is, you know, on the new PRISMA 2020, isn't it, that all search strategies be produced. It was, I think, previously just one Medline strategy, and we encourage students to always put at least one search strategy, one full search strategy in an appendix. But, you know, I think I'm not so sure whether that happens all the time. I think one of the other issues as well is, you know, that sources like the Cochrane Library, Scopus and Web of Science are platforms that contain multiple databases that can be searched separately. So it's important to record which databases on these platforms are being searched as well. I'm sure you're familiar with Cochrane. It contains the Cochrane database of systematic reviews and the Central Register of Controlled Clinical Trials. So are the students searching both or just one of those as well? And I've lost complete track of the number of times I've had to correct spelling mistakes with the labels applied to the databases as well, especially PsycInfo. PsycInfo seems to be a real bugbear with students and spelling as well. So watch out for that one as well. I suppose really a very common omission in the reporting of the search methods is all around how the student will actually manage the search results as well. So, for example, are they using EndNote to import the results and remove duplications prior to screening? Okay. And I suppose really one area that's perhaps more common than you may think, and this is perhaps something you may not see because you may not be involved in looking at the whole systematic review once it's written up. You may only just be asked to look to help with the search part and not see the final product, so to speak. Is that I've had a number of people, number of students embedding their search results in with their methods as well, where really these two things need to be reported on separately as well. So that's probably one of the more different types of errors really within the systematic review. So how can you help with the reporting of the search strategy then? Well, you can obviously signpost the students to the relevant search criteria in the methods and results sections of the PRISMA guidance. But in addition, we produce a document which has been put together with an acknowledgement of their assessment guidance. So we look at what they're asked to produce, and then we develop the structured guidance around the assessment guidance, because obviously some students are asked to do certain things and others aren't. So we just need to be careful. And we kind of look at the different sections of the review and we say, actually, if you want to get the best marks in this section, and because let's be honest, the method section, you can score very, very highly in the method section of a systematic review if you follow the basic principles of, yes, describing what you're doing, but then justifying why you're doing it as well. Highlighting, with minimal effort what they need to do, what they need to write about in order to get the best marks for those particular sections as well. And I think, I always recommend to students when they're writing up their systematic review, do write the methods first. The methods is the easiest part to write up. And then once they're written up, leave it alone. Don't go back to it. So don't go putting your results in, it's done, finished, move on. Okay, so in terms of error number 9, then this is to do with the poor reporting of the PRISMA flowchart. Now, I was considering asking people to put in the chat what these issues might be, but considering there's quite a lot of people in the room, I won't bother because otherwise it'll be pinging all day. And this is the poor reporting of you know, the PRISMA flowchart as well. You know, in number 1, the example there that hopefully you'll see on the slides when they get sent out later. You know, the numbers don't add up. That's the most common. You know, do their numbers add up? Number 2, they insert their PRISMA diagram, but it's split over pages, multiple pages, in their actual, you know, submission, and that's not a good thing either. Number 3 is that they label it a PRISMA diagram, but it isn't PRISMA. It's one they've made up themselves. Number 4, William, I can see you said it's a masterpiece. Yeah, so but this is the problem, isn't it, with formatting? It moves around when we're kind of moving documents. These things move, they shift. So actually, you know, be careful and check these things over as well. PDF it all. And number 5, I don't know if you can tell what's wrong with this one. There's not too much wrong with the actual diagram itself, but it's where it's put. You know, it's really just been thrown into the results section at the very start of the results section with no textual context behind it whatsoever. They've gone to their main, this is the results section, there's my PRISMA flowchart. So there's no context behind it as well. So, you know, these are some of the things. So I suppose I've spotted the most errors around, you know, the flowcharts as well. So, you know, make sure that it's in the appropriate place, make sure it's the appropriate type of flowchart, but also make sure it's signposted to from the text to the flowchart as well. So yeah, check your numbers add up, get them to check that, you know, record. I offer them a template actually for helping them to record their numbers. So I will send them a template to help them record their databases, the date they searched, and the numbers for each source that they're searching as well, because they're going to need that information when it comes to writing up the PRISMA at the end. So why not have it at the start and remind them to do that as well? You know, introduce them to the PRISMA tool as well, show them, you know, what things are supposed to be reported where in the results section. Basic use of Word, section breaks are fantastic for, you know, using to kind of create your PRISMA diagrams and inserting tables and anything really as well, because with section breaks you can move your page from portrait to landscape within the middle of the document as well. So, you know, I've always found them to be extremely useful as well. You know, and another tip I give them is, you know, just do your PRISMA chart in a different place. You know, use the template from PRISMA, sort it all there in a separate document, and then screenshot it and throw it into your assignment, and job done. There we go. But there are other tools out there as well. You know, there are certain screening tools for systematic reviews that also allow the students to automatically create a PRISMA diagram as well. So, you know, these things are out there as well. And they also, I think, on the PRISMA website, signpost you to an app that allows you to kind of create and download different types of PRISMA diagrams as well. So there are, you know, online tools out there to be able to assist as well. But for my students, really, one of the omissions we do see is for, you know, a recognition of the limitations of their search. It's often, you know, a learning outcome that they recognise the strengths and limitations of their whole study. The search is part of those methods. So a recognition of the strengths and limitations of the search, you know, is generally good practice to highlight as well. And also not only what those limitations are, but the potential for that to impact on their review findings as well. You know, if they haven't searched, you know, the grey literature, you know, is it likely that that is going to have an impact or potentially change the outcome of their review findings? You know, it is important to kind of know as well. So what can they talk about here? You know, the practical limitations really as well. For their review findings, talk about publication bias, that kind of thing. It's that terminology that gets you those higher marks as well within your student work. But to kind of finish really, because I've done my top 10 now, is, you know, and I do love this question because it's my favourite question of all, and it's usually the one that I get asked the most, is, you know, from my students as well. You know, how many studies do I need to include in a systematic review? And my answer, if you're interested, is that unless the assessment criteria specifies a number, then there is no set number, you know, but you can't really have a systematic review with only 2 studies or less, because, you know, it's too few to allow you to synthesize and demonstrate your ability to compare and contrast across the evidence base. The fewer studies you have, the more in-depth the description and critique should be, potentially. The greater the number of studies you include, the more difficult it is to kind of balance the need for the depth of critique with the breadth of the information you have to kind of deal with as well. So, you know, my advice is to scope at the beginning, look at the volume and make decisions based on, you know, the volume of literature at the very start. If there's too many studies, you know, tweak the inclusion criteria to really kind of focus that search down as well. And if there are too few studies, discuss with the supervisor, you know, this may be okay for master's levels, but it might not be, sorry, it might be okay for PhD students not to find too much information, but for master's level, where they're being assessed on certain criteria that involves actually looking at evidence as well, then we need to demonstrate, you know, that they can achieve the learning outcomes as well. So, really, this is kind of a whistle-stop tour of the most common errors, omissions, and problems associated with students' dissertations, as from a perspective of someone who is an information professional at heart, has spent 20 years, well, 15 years probably, marking and supervising student dissertations as well. Now, there's lots more errors that occur within, you know, systematic reviews beyond the search. Referencing is an issue, but that's, you know, not new, is it really? But, you know, they choose the wrong tools for quality assessment. You know, they select the wrong type of analysis. They have a very long-winded introduction or background section, leaving a very short amount of space for the bulk of the work, which is the methods and results. You know, they fail to comment on how quality of included studies will impact on their work as well. So, you know, I do recommend this book, and I should say, you know, as a that other books are available, but this is the book that the Liverpool Reviews and Implementation Group have actually written around doing a systematic review, and so far it's the only book written from the student perspective as well. And we've just finished an update on the 3rd edition, which will be out in spring 2024, and we are about to start writing some teaching resources to go alongside the book on the Sage platform as well. So there we go. That's the plug. I did mention I would put some useful free training sources, and these are probably the 3 most useful that I've come across lately as well. Carrie Price, I found her YouTube for students are really, really good, and they're very short as well. So, you know, some useful kind of tips there for you as well in terms of training resources. And that's it. That is it. Thank you very much for allowing me to come and talk today. And, you know, if anyone does have any questions, my email, you feel free to, Louise, to circulate the slides. If anyone has any questions and they want to email me, I'm very happy to kind of, you know, talk about anything systematic review related and involvement of information professionals, because we are such a, I suppose, undervalued resource when it comes to systematic reviews. And I'm very much hoping that lots of you will be involved in doing searching for systematic reviews, but actually consider even going as far as being involved in doing the reviewing as well, because that's what I've done. I've moved up into doing the full reviewing and I love it. There we go. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Michelle. You know what? There was some of them where I was going, no, and then the chat went mad. Someone was like, oh, if we got asked 1 million, you know, we'd be rich if we'd got, you know, if we got paid how many times we'd asked how many should we have. You know, and I think a lot of us was nodding quite a lot then.
Yeah.
And Carrie Price, I've just actually recently discovered, I think they're quite new, aren't they? Her YouTube videos, because I've recently found those as well. I just wondered if you would share the table that you were speaking about? Because I'm sure I'm going to get asked.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
The one that you share with students, if that's okay. I don't know if anyone's got any questions. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, there's one coming through there. You said you asked for co-authorship. Is it just for helping the research or when you conduct it yourself?
No, just I think, you know, if you think about people who have their names on systematic review papers, and quite often there can be 15, 16 different names on a systematic review paper. A lot of those are just advising on the methods, and they tend to be the supervisors. They don't actually conduct any of the methods. They'll read through the paper. They will advise on what the student has to do, but they don't actually do the data extraction. They don't do the quality assessment. They leave that, you know, to the student to do, but their names are still on the paper. So as someone who's advising on the methodology and perhaps doing a little bit more in terms of guiding the student and you know, peer reviewing the searches for them, making suggestions for tweaking. Sometimes I'll go in and help them amend their searches as well. You know, it's that kind of level of input really that I think requires a co-authorship. And now anytime any of our students email me with requests for help, I'll say, well, this is what I offer for free and this is what I want in return. You know, I'm not shy.
Yeah, but I think though as well, certainly, you know, more recently, I think it's becoming more acceptable for us to ask and for us to be expected to be on that paper. I think, you know, in time gone by, we weren't, were we? But I think it's becoming much easier for us to ask that question. Anyway, there's a couple more questions in the chat, so I'm going to move on. Do you have any advice for dealing with people who are definitely doing a systematic review but don't want to take on board the extent of the I can't even finish that question. But don't want to take on board the extent of the search they need to do.
Okay. So yeah. Well, you know, what can you do? It's one of the, I think we're talking from a student perspective here. There are some students who probably just want to get it done. You know, and that's fine. I think, you know, it will be, you know, well, great. What if you can do what you do well, marvelously, and if you can highlight what perhaps the omissions are and the potential impact of those, that's a recognition and an understanding of, yeah, you've not managed to quite do what you've been, you know, we would expect in a systematic review search, but you know, there were these potential restrictions, you know, issues, but you recognize it and you say that, just add it into the discussion section as a recognition tool. Don't ignore it.
Okay, that's good advice, I think, as well. Another question, you mentioned you have recorded webinars on searching different databases. Any of these publicly available?
Not yet.
Coming soon.
Coming soon. We are currently, I'll tell you why, is because I took on a new role only in April this year, and my feet haven't touched the floor. And it's just been, I've been so busy that I've not been able to kind of update what I want to update, because there's been a change in Ovid certainly since I last did that as well. So I want to make sure that they're as up to date as possible, but I'm sure there's plenty of, you know, guidance on YouTube, really good stuff out there that, you know, you can use. But yeah, okay, once I get them sorted, I'll let you know.
Good, thank you for that. Ruth is asking, would it be possible to reuse your presentation, with credit of course, as a presentation to dissertation supervisors?
Yeah, do what you like, I don't care.
I don't know if I've missed any, just let me have a look. I posted a question in the Q&A. No, I didn't use the Q&A because I wasn't quite sure, so just give me a second while I flip across.
No problem.
It's taking a minute. Oh, do you provide guidance to academic staff on how to assess a search strategy, or is that all done by you?
No, we are looking to create a training module for supervisors, because we recognise that not all supervisors necessarily have an expanded, I suppose, understanding of what the systematic review is and what the expectations are. We have to kind of fit in with what they want their student to do. So, you know, but yeah, we do. And I think it's also important to educate, you know, staff, not only from the teaching perspective, but also from the research perspective as well, when they're applying for grants. You know, for evidence synthesis, we encourage our, you know, our researchers at the university to contact us, but, you know, well, there's only so much we can do. We're quite small. So we do try to kind of advise them on, well, if you're going to write a grant for an evidence synthesis application, then these are the things that you need to be thinking about and considering as well. So, you know, yes, that's something that we are doing at Liverpool. Yeah.
Thank you. They're coming thick and fast, these questions now. Why do you think so many systematic reviews get through peer review with poor or non-existent search strategies? Some of these are making me giggle just because I'm thinking, oh God, yeah, I've seen so many of them.
No, it's true. I don't know. The answer is I don't know. I don't know. If editors, it's one of those things. I always remember Ben Goldacre's presentation many years ago. You know, around looking at trials and you know the registration of trials and then the publication of them in the journal, and you know, is what they said they're going to do actually what they did, kind of thing. It's the same kind of thing with the systematic review. Is that you know, they say they want authors to follow PRISMA guidance, and then they don't check to make sure that they have followed the PRISMA guidance. And to be honest, students do the same thing as well. They'll throw it in because you know it's good to have it in there, but then they don't do it. So you know, I suppose it's a bit more. I don't know. It just needs a bit more rigor in the peer review process, and you know, an understanding, because sometimes you know reviews are sent out to people who have an understanding of the subject area, but not necessarily a great understanding of the methodology. Do
you think we need more librarians, information professionals on those panels? You know,
absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. And you know what? It looks good on your CV as well. You know, for that as well. But I think it's a difficult one because, yes, they need to be involved, but do they feel confident enough to be involved as a peer reviewer to the extent that it's usually they wanting comment on the whole systematic review, not just the search part? Is it something they should separate out? That's something that could be debated. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think more involvement from us guys, honestly. A question: how much a lecturer, supervisor provided incorrect information to the student researcher in terms of searching?
Say that again. Sorry, I didn't quite catch.
So how do you approach a lecturer or a supervisor who has provided incorrect information?
I would just be honest and upfront and say, oh, you know, you've sent this guidance through. This is actually what we suggest, you know, and taking it, I suppose, from, you know, not, I suppose yeah, being, you know, I suppose just raising awareness with them, say, actually, this is probably a better way to do it because, and then justifying, you know, why it is the better way to do things as well. We often, I think, you know, what I've found is that they will set a systematic review, and this happened during COVID, obviously, is that, you know, a lot of students ended up ditching their primary research and taking on a systematic review. But they didn't necessarily understand what the systematic review was, and actually what they wanted students to do was just a rapid review as well. And to be honest, for some modules where you're only looking at very small 2,500 word assignments, you can't expect them to do a full systematic review, you know, with only 2,500 words, so to speak. So we do encourage our tutors to consider the rapid review approach, whereby the student is still following the principles of systematic review methodology, but they are doing it in a more of a condensed way. So they're not missing out on the skills by any sense of the imagination, but they're being more feasible in terms of what, you know, time frames, etc., that the student has to be able to kind of pull these things together. Because as everybody knows, you really will struggle if you've never done a systematic review before in your life to do one in 2 weeks before your deadline. So, and I think that's another misconception from the student perspective, is that, oh, it's, you know, they'll leave it and leave it and leave it till the last minute because they don't have to go and collect data from patients. It's something that the onus really is on the student themselves to go out and, you know, and be motivated to do the review as well. So yeah, there we go.
Okay, so I've just got 2 more questions, I think. Hopefully we've got time for them. I'm seeing more and more in systematic review presentation conversations that limits and filters such as English language only, no conference abstracts. Oh gosh, my thing's going off, so I've lost the question. Do you think there's a disconnect between what is being taught at postgrad and these kind of expectations?
Yeah, you know, it's difficult, isn't it? I think it depends upon, you know, I suppose what the student is being expected to produce at the end of the day, the time frame that they have to produce these things as well. I think if I was thinking at PhD level, then you would be thinking about making sure these things are more rigorously applied. But for a master's level, you know, 2,500 word dissertation, you know, you get like sometimes they only ever get one, or, you know, well, how many they had 3 sessions on how to do a systematic review, and then they were expected to write the dissertation. That's not a lot, you know, and, you know, so you've kind of got to manage what you're able to deliver with what the student can be expected to achieve within that time frame. But as long as the student recognizes the limitations of that, there is that's what we're aiming for. It's just is at the very least a recognition of the limitations.
Okay. Do you accompany ESSA in other subjects than health?
At the
Something
minute,
along that
no.
environment?
We've got quite a big Institute for Population Health that covers 5 different faculties. We are moving into veterinary science, which I'm quite excited about. And dentistry, we do a lot with dentistry, and that brings up its own interesting challenges around searching as well. And I'm hoping to write a paper around, with my current PhD students in dentistry, around some of the challenges of searching for that literature, for doing systematic reviews in dentistry as well. So yeah, I've got lots of things I want to write about, and I don't have the time.
Not got the time, not got the time, because you've got a day job. And this is going to have to be the last question, guys. I know there's more questions in the chat, but we're just running out of time now. Do you provide guidance to academic staff on how to assess a search strategy, or is that all done by you?
No, I don't. I don't offer, at the minute, I don't offer, and I don't necessarily always mark the particularly the module assignments. I just get drafted in to deliver the training rather than actually mark it. For the dissertations, the bigger pieces of work, and the PhD students, yes, I'm involved in the whole part of that, and the marking as well. But for some of them, no, I don't. Should I offer? Yeah, I probably should offer some guidance. Would they understand it? I don't know. It's difficult. The issue I have is all about this and the quality of the marking. It's not just about the search methods either. It's about the whole, you know, the whole process as well. So I do have some reservations there.
But the context as well, isn't it? And we can give everyone guidance, can't we? It's about putting it all together. Thank you very much, Michelle. Sorry, guys, we really have run out of time. Michelle has to go off and do all these ESSA things that she does.
If anyone does have any questions, so just feel free to email me directly as well. I'm very happy to kind of chat, and if you're interested in, you know, do some reviewing as well, I'm always, you know, interested to have some, you know, information professionals that, you know, even if you want to get involved and just have a go, and obviously sadly not be paid, but, you know, just to get some experience, it's a start, isn't it, as well? So maybe we can do something to kind of build up skills as well, in more than just the searching part of the review.
Oh, that's such a good opportunity, I think, as well. So thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you for everybody who attended. The chat went absolutely bonkers, and I was trying to keep up.
Well, do you know what, Louise? What I suggest is, I mean, if you can send me the questions from the chat, I can respond, and, you know, in a document or something like that, if people wanted questions answering, if that would kind of help. I can't say I'm going to answer them. I'll give you great answers, but I'll certainly answer them.
No, that'd be excellent. What I'll do is I'll copy and paste them into a document. I'll send them on to you, Michelle. When you're ready, send them back, and I'll get them out to everyone. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Michelle. And I'll speak to you all soon.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.